In the early 1720s, Britain's finest minds walked willingly into a trap made of paper, promises, and pride. Politicians, nobles, even the man who mapped the movements of planets, Isaac Newton, all believed they stood on the edge of limitless wealth. What they actually stood on was thin air. The illusion had a name, the South Sea Company. It began with debt. Britain had just survived the War of the Spanish Succession, a costly decade of fighting that drained the treasury and left the crown owing sums so vast they seemed impossible to repay. The government was buried under obligations, and the interest alone devoured its revenues. Creditors wanted reassurance that their money was safe. Ministers wanted the problem to disappear. Then came an idea that sounded like salvation. In 1711, a new company appeared with a grand name and an even grander promise, the South Sea Company. On paper, it was meant to open the riches of South America to British trade, a world of gold, silver, and exotic treasures waiting to be seized. But its true purpose lay elsewhere. The South Sea Company was never about shipping cargo. It was about shipping debt. The proposal was clever. The company would assume a large portion of the government's debt, turning those IOUs into shares that could be traded. Creditors would exchange their claims for stock, gaining the chance to profit from future trade while the government gained breathing room. Everyone appeared to win. The scheme sparkled with logic, an illusion. Because the supposed trade monopoly was a mirage, Spain controlled most of South America and gave Britain only token rights. A few slave ships, a handful of ceremonial cargoes, nothing close to a fortune. The company's real product was belief. It sold confidence. And in London, confidence was contagious. By the start of 1720, the illusion had turned into wildfire. Pamphlets promised untold wealth. Newspapers whispered about a golden future. Parliament received gifts to ensure cooperation. The company's directors spread rumors of fortunes waiting just over the horizon. And people believed them, not out of ignorance, but out of hope. Share prices began their climb. From around £100 early in the year, they soared past 500 by spring and nearly 1,000 by summer. Britain was drunk on speculation. The aristocrat and the shopkeeper, the bishop and the sailor, all wanted a piece of the dream. Coffee houses buzzed with gossip of instant fortunes. Servants quit jobs to trade stock. Poets abandoned writing for investing. The entire nation seemed to have replaced faith in trade with faith in growth. Even Isaac Newton was drawn in. He had bought early and sold with a tidy profit. For a moment, the great scientist had outsmarted the market. But as prices climbed ever higher, he could not resist the gravity of greed. He re-entered at the peak, and when the illusion burst, he lost nearly everything. "I can calculate the motions of heavenly bodies," he would later say, "but not the madness of men." That sentence is the quiet heart of every financial mania. Intelligence cannot protect against emotion when crowds believe they have found a shortcut to paradise. The machinery of the bubble was simple, almost beautiful in its logic. Rising prices attracted investors, whose money made prices rise still more. Parliament, steeped in self-interest, refused to question the miracle. King George I himself became governor of the company, lending royal legitimacy to a house built of cards. By midsummer, men mortgaged estates, women pawned jewelry, and families borrowed heavily just to buy a share. It was the 18th century version of a crypto frenzy, the same fever, only written with quills instead of code. But beneath the glitter, nothing had changed. The company still had no meaningful trade, no real profits. Dividends came not from commerce, but from the inflow of new investors' money, a pyramid disguised as progress. And like all pyramids, it could not rise forever. By autumn, cracks appeared. Questions spread. Why were ships not returning with cargo? Why did the company's ledgers gleam with numbers but lack gold? Panic, slow at first, then sudden, swept through London. As quickly as prices had soared, they collapsed. Shares fell from near £1,000 to almost where they had begun. Fortunes vanished in weeks. Families that had seemed newly rich were ruined by winter. The collapse was swift and merciless. Merchants who had dreamed of retirement returned to poverty. Clergymen who had preached prosperity now preached repentance. Ordinary citizens lost their savings. Middle-class households saw generations of effort erased. Yet among the powerful, the damage was softer. Those closest to Parliament and the court were quietly reimbursed, shielded by the same system they had helped inflate. Once again, losses flowed downward, and privilege floated above the wreckage. The anger was volcanic. Crowds gathered outside the exchange demanding justice. Newspapers named the guilty: ministers, lords, financiers, the architects of delusion. A parliamentary inquiry was launched, promising to uncover the rot. A few directors were stripped of wealth and shamed in public. But the deeper structure, the bond between government and finance, survived untouched. The state could not punish the machine that kept it alive. One gesture tried to restore faith: the Bubble Act of 1720. On the surface, it outlawed the creation of joint stock companies without royal approval, a supposed shield against future frauds. But irony ran deep. The law had been drafted by the South Sea Company itself to crush rivals and secure its own monopoly over investor money. It was a regulation that pretended to protect the public while defending those who deceived them. That single twist tells you how power truly works in finance. Even in collapse, the rules are written to preserve the system, not the people inside it. By the time the smoke cleared, Britain's economy had changed forever. Trust had evaporated. The very concept of joint stock investment, the engine of modern capitalism, was poisoned for a generation. Innovation slowed, money retreated to safety. The Bank of England quietly stepped into greater authority, becoming the state's dependable partner. The South Sea dream was over, but its shadow stretched across every ledger in London. The South Sea bubble did not end when its stock collapsed. It lingered, in memory, in law, in the cautious hearts of investors. Britain's faith in speculation had cracked, yet the machine itself endured. The debts remained. The political web that had birthed the illusion stayed intact. The system had merely learned how to hide its gears more cleverly. For decades, the event was whispered like a curse. Families ruined by it refused to speak the company's name. Writers used it as a moral fable, greed punished by poetic justice. But financiers studied it for a different reason. They saw not a disaster to avoid, but a method to refine. The South Sea bubble had shown that money and power could collaborate to fabricate value from air and persuade even the wisest minds to defend the lie. That was the real inheritance of 1720, a blueprint. The mechanism would be used again, dressed in new clothes each time. Centuries passed, empires rose and vanished. But the pattern, promise, mania, collapse, protection of the powerful, repeated with clockwork precision. Look, for example, at the late 1990s, the age of glowing screens and digital dreams. The dot-com boom spoke the same language as the South Sea Company. A new world, limitless trade, boundless opportunity. Companies with no profit and barely a product were valued in the billions because the story felt too beautiful to doubt. The idea was enough. Reality could wait. Investors, not only amateurs but great funds, universities, and banks, poured in. The charts climbed. Television anchors replaced the pamphleteers of London coffeehouses, whispering that a new economy had dawned. "Get in," they said, "before you're left behind." It was the same melody that had played 3 centuries earlier, only with faster tempo and brighter lights. Then the melody stopped. When the bubble burst, trillions in paper wealth evaporated. Startups collapsed. Pension funds shrank. But as before, the elite institutions, those closest to the source of credit, endured, and they were hurt, not destroyed. The small investor carried the heavy end of the fall. 8 years later, another chorus began, this time built on brick and mortgage. The housing bubble of 2008 repeated the South Sea formula almost perfectly. Mortgages were bundled, sliced, and sold as if they were risk-free jewels. The logic sounded unshakable. People always need houses, so the loans must be safe. Ratings agencies like Parliament in the 1720s blessed the scheme with official approval. Again, prices rose because prices rose. Again, the illusion became self-sustaining until it wasn't. When the collapse came, it was global. Millions lost homes and jobs. Governments rushed to rescue banks, declaring them too big to fail. The cycle completed itself. Losses socialized downward, privilege preserved at the top. The architecture of delusion had survived its own earthquake, and then came the newest frontier. A digital one, sparkling with code and charisma. Crypto coins, meme stocks, decentralized dreams. The pitch was familiar. This time is different. No kings, no central banks, no middlemen. Just technology and freedom. Early adopters became legends. Charts soared skyward. Online influencers replaced the coffeehouse brokers, promising revolutions through hashtags and emojis. Once again, ordinary people rushed in, chasing the rumor of easy wealth. And once again, reality arrived. Values collapsed overnight. Projects vanished, exchanges imploded, fortunes turned to numbers that no longer meant anything. The insiders cashed out early. The crowd was left holding digital dust. The costumes had changed, but the play was identical. So what endures through all these centuries of folly? A single lesson, ignored every time it is learned. Intelligence is no armor against desire. Even Newton, who could explain gravity itself, could not resist the pull of greed. The crowd's excitement, the illusion of certainty, the fear of missing out. These are stronger forces than mathematics. They warp reason, silence caution, and make geniuses forget their own logic. The second lesson is colder. Regulation rarely protects the public. The Bubble Act of 1720 pretended to defend investors, but was written to defend the system. Modern laws often do the same. Each new crisis brings new committees, new words of reassurance. Yet somehow the same patterns reemerge. That is because rules are written not by victims, but by survivors. The third is perhaps the hardest truth. Bubbles are engineered. They are not random storms of greed. They are weather systems created by those who profit from the wind. Governments need growth, financiers need movement, and the masses provide the fuel. Each cycle transfers wealth upward, quietly, predictably, while the story of progress keeps the engine turning. History doesn't repeat itself word for word. It rhymes. And the rhyme of the South Sea bubble can still be heard in every trading floor, every headline that promises the next big thing. The instruments have changed. Stocks, mortgages, tokens. But the rhythm is the same. Optimism rising, reason fading, collapse returning. So what should we learn, truly learn from all this? First, that financial literacy is survival, not luxury. If you don't understand how bubbles form, you are inside one without knowing it. Second, that promises of effortless wealth are almost always crafted illusions. The glitter of opportunity is bait, and the hook is your trust. And third, that real wealth is patient. It grows from comprehension, not hysteria, from value, not rumor. Every generation swears it has built a smarter system. Every generation is wrong. The South Sea bubble was the 18th century's lesson. The dot-com crash, the housing collapse, the cryptomania, all are verses in the same long poem about human nature and power. And if even Isaac Newton could be blinded by the brightness of easy gain, what hope does anyone have without skepticism? Knowledge is the only protection. Doubt is the only honest currency. Everything else is just another South Sea dream, waiting for the next believer. So if this story made you pause, remember it the next time the crowd shouts, guaranteed profit. History always whispers a quieter truth. Nothing rises forever.